All right, fam. Happy Halloween. Good afternoon. Today is October 31st, and it is 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Central, and we're going to get started here with a quick 30-minute discussion about allocation and risk and how I view those to be the most important part of figuring out regarding your trading journey. I will be the first to admit that whenever I was new to trading, I did not have this figured out. Unfortunately, I would enter a trade with various allocations amounts, really depending upon my emotions regarding the trade. And it never seemed to fail that the trades I didn't have a lot of confidence in and would put a tiny amount at risk were the trades that did the best. And then the trades that I thought were going to be stellar, and I would put a very large amount of money at risk, tended to not work out so well in my favor. And that was very frustrating because honestly, my P&L percentage was not moving in the right direction. I don't know if anyone else has struggled with that or not. Maybe it's just me, but I am going to guess that some of you have also fell into the category where your allocation amount varies per trade and your results vary per trade, and you're not having consistent account growth moving from bottom left-hand corner to the top right-hand corner. So I find that allocation and risk is the most important part to get down in order to become a more consistent and profitable traders. All right. So that's why I want to spend the next 30 minutes with you talking about what I have found has helped me over the last 2.5 years to become a consistently profitable trader. So, the first question that I need to ask you, and if you want to participate, you can by placing your answer in the chat. But that question is, what is the amount you are comfortable with losing on a trade? Is anyone brave enough to throw an amount out there that you're comfortable with losing on a trade? Great, Avery. Thank you for your answer. Appreciate that. Uh, Anyone else? Anyone comfortable enough to throw out an amount that you're comfortable with losing on a trade? We got 250, 300. Yeah, Austin Trader, for each trade, what is the amount you're comfortable with losing? Come on, guys. Don't be scared. There is no wrong answers in this. I'll tell you that whenever I got asked this question, Trendy John asked me this question whenever I was brand new to trading supply and demand. And my answer was $1,000. I was comfortable with losing $1,000. That's the first amount that popped into my head. And I'm going to tell you what he told me. And each one of you have put that amount that you're comfortable with losing on a trade in the chat. Now I'm going to tell you this. Cut that amount in half. And that is probably closer to the amount that you are truly comfortable with losing on a trade. It's crazy. Sounds crazy, right? But what I found out was it was true. So whenever I said $1,000, John told me to cut that amount in half. So I cut it down to $500. And I said, okay, we're going to test this out. So I cut it down to $500, and that was my allocation amount for each trade. Now, let me be perfectly clear. Going in to a trade, allocating, I'm going to use my example whenever I first started, allocating $500 per trade. That was the amount I was comfortable with losing on a trade. But in no way, shape, or form, or am I saying you allow each trade to go to max debit. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying that if $500 was the amount I was comfortable with losing on a trade, and I only allocated $500 per trade, by doing that, it allowed me to trade my plan. What do I mean by trade your plan or trade my plan? Each and every trade that you get into should have a plan before you get into it. What does the plan consist of? Your entry, where you're going to trim or take profits, what your target is, so the ultimate move where you are perfectly happy with the trade, what is that final target, and then, of course, a stop. This is very important. A stop is where, according to your plan, the trade is no longer valid. So in my case, I trade supply and demand, and most often I'm buying in a demand zone. So I will have an entry where I'm going to enter that trade, and sometimes I'm scaling in, so I have multiple entry levels. I know where I'm going to trim or take profits, and I know where my target is that I will exit the trade at, usually via a trailing stop. And I also know where my stop is, where the trade is no longer valid. And by having or allocating an amount that I am comfortable with going to zero allows me to trade my plan according to the plan. Now, this is allowing me to trade with discipline, and that is so important. There is no way you can determine if a strategy that you're focusing on trading, there's no way you can determine if that strategy is successful if you do not trade that strategy according to the rules, right? Consistently. It's not sometimes I'm going to trade the plan, but sometimes I'm going to break the rules and not trade the plan. And no, You need to trade it with discipline and consistency to truly know if the strategy is profitable. And by having an allocation amount that you're comfortable with going to zero whenever you enter the trade, it allows you to trade your plan without the emotions of, oh my gosh, if this trade goes to zero, I'm going to blow up my account. I'm going to take I'm just going to throw a number out here, $10,000 account down to $4,000 because I've allocated $6,000 on one trade. That is not wise. Okay. So finding the allocation amount, understanding your risk, because this is mainly regarding swing trading, okay? Day trading, we have a little more control over the option premium and where we're stopping out, etc. But any trade that you choose to keep in your portfolio after the bell rings, you are at risk of waking up the next morning and the option premium value being zero. That is the reality, my friends. We can have the best levels in the entire world, but nothing is 100%. You cannot guarantee that when you wake up the next day, that position that you carried overnight will have any value. That and that alone is why I finally got to a place that I only allocate per trade the amount that I'm willing to go to zero on that trade. Now, that brings up another important point that is sometimes missed when considering allocation and risk. So let's use for an example that you have a $10,000 account and your allocation amount is $500 per trade. That means if you carry over 5 trades overnight, you have 25%, right, of your account at risk. So not only do you need to be aware of the allocation amount you have on per trade, but you also need to consider the number of trades that you have on when the bell rings, because that then becomes the amount of your account that is at risk overnight. So for me, if I have a $10,000 account and I'm allocating $500 per trade, the absolute maximum amount of trades that, and I never even do this, but I'm going to say it, the maximum that you would want to have overnight exposure or risk to is 40%, maybe. I stick to the philosophy that I want to have no more than 25% of my total account value allocated and carrying over into the next day. So you have the allocation per trade, but please, please, please consider the allocation of your total account. Okay? Does that make sense? Anyone have any questions regarding that? Y'all following me? Following along? All right, cool. So, once you find that allocation amount that you're comfortable with trading per trade, then I challenge you to do this. Don't grade your trades. Be consistent in the amount allocated per trade. If you're scaling into a trade, which I often do, I often have an entry that I will allocate a half of my allocation, and then a second entry that if price continues to dip in a demand zone, then I will add the other half of allocation to, right? So if you're scaling in, you need to consider, okay, if I have 3 different entry points, then my first entry is a third of my allocation. My second entry is another third of the allocation. Sometimes that first entry might only be 1 contract. Then the second entry might only be 1 contract. But the third entry, because of the price of the option at that time is less, then that could be 2 contracts, which by scaling in, you're lowering your dollar cost average of those contracts. And at the end of the time, you're not afraid of missing out on a trade because you didn't get in, right? You might only have 1 contract, but at least your foot's in the door to then take profits at targets. Or you might be at the opposite end of it and prices come all the way down to your last entry. You still have a third or a half, depending on how you're scaling in, available to buy contracts, and you're buying them at a sales price compared to that first entry. All right. But at the end of all of your entries, make sure that you have not over allocated on the trade. I'm going to tell you what happens if you over allocate on a trade. I'm going to tell you from personal experience how I can tell if I'm over allocated. All right. The first thing is when price is moving against me in the trade, I am nervous, right? I am extremely nervous. That is a sign that you're over allocated. What else might you feel when you're over allocated? If you feel the need to get out of the trade, not according to your plan, then you're probably over allocated. Does that make sense? So my plan is this is my stop. Say it's $50 when the price of the equity goes below 50, that's my stop. But I'm looking at my monitor tab on TOS and my position is down 40%. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've lost too much money. I got to get out. But I look at my plan and, oh, but wait, price of the equity is still at 51 and I said my stop was 50 and I'm feeling this need to get out of the trade early, I'm over allocated. So, what can we do if, after, say, you try this out, and you got to give it a good sample size? You can't just base it on one trade. You need to base it on 10, 20, 30 trades, right? You get more comfortable as each trade goes along. So base it off 10, 20, 30 trades. If you're still feeling those things, guess what? It's okay to lower that allocation amount. You might need to bring it down from $500 allocated to $400 allocated or $250 allocated. Then give that allocation amount a run for 10, 20, 30 trades. And if you're not feeling those emotions and the price of the equity is staying within your plan, and you're not feeling the emotions of I'm nervous, I feel the need to get out before my stop, then you found that magic number. All right. Now, what about raising your allocation amount? I have found that once we get a few wins under our belt, we all of a sudden think, oh my gosh, I am the best trader in the whole wide world and I never lose. And you know what? I know that I said 2 weeks ago that I was comfortable with losing $500, but dang, man, I'm good. And now I'm raising my allocation amount to $1,000 a trade. It's only been 2 weeks, right? You're just getting comfortable. You're getting a little overconfident, probably, but you're just getting comfortable with that allocation amount, and you double it after only 2 weeks. And then all of those previous fear, nervousness, feeling the need to get out when it hasn't hit your stop level on your chart, whatever level you use. For me, the bottom of a demand zone. Guess what? The biggest mistake people make is raising the allocation amount too early. Hear me. Raising your allocation amount too early. For me, I traded that $500 allocation per trade. I traded that for over 1 year before I raised it to $750. Okay? I needed to get to the point that my confidence was at a level that raising the allocation amount to $750 did not cause me to fall back into those old, nervous, anxious, fearful feelings when I was over allocated in trades. And if you increase your allocation amount and those feelings are coming back and causing you not to trade your plan with discipline, it's okay to go back to your original allocation amount. Guys, the most important thing here is that trading consistently and becoming profitable is not a race. It's not a sprint, right? Anything in life, when developing good habits, takes time. Trading is no different. So, if you cannot work your way up from a small allocation with success, please don't think that if you could trade say your allocation is 500, please don't think that, man, if I could have my allocation at 5,000, I would be such a better trader, because that couldn't be further from the truth. If you can't trade well, consistently profitable with a small allocation, there is nothing that says having a larger allocation is all of a sudden magically going to help you become a better trader. All right? So we have about 4 minutes left. I wanted to open it up to questions that you might have regarding allocation, risk, etc. If you have any questions about that, let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to answer your questions. I have a question here from Avery asking me to address how I determine when and where to trim my contracts as the trade moves in my favor. And I will say this, Avery and Austin Trader. Um, I use supply and demand levels. I use a variety of indicators that we have in the trendy room. So I'm going to talk about, I use trendy edges to trim at. I will use like if I'm day trading, I might look for candle formations, inside and up, inside and down candle formations on smaller time frames, such as a 30-minute chart or a 15-minute chart. This if I'm day trading. I will look for those smaller time frame candle formations. If I'm swing trading, then obviously I'm looking at those candle formations on a 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour chart. And then I'll also use Fibonacci, so measuring fibs and trading at the Fibonacci levels as trims. But that could be a topic that we discuss in a whole nother uh, chart or whole nother session. T-Bird, thoughts on handling multiple accounts of different sizes. So T-Bird, if you have multiple accounts of different sizes, honestly, at the end of the day, the amount that you allocate per trade, it really has less to do about the size of the account and more to do about controlling your emotions while in a trade, and especially a trade that's not going in your favor. So I would say that the size of an account has little to do with it except for the overall picture. You know what I'm saying? Like the overall what you're carrying overnight and what percentage of that account is at risk. That's the that's where that comes in. But as far as what you allocate per trade, I don't think it is dependent upon the value of the account. For me, it's more dependent upon my emotions when I'm in a trade, because I can tell you that whenever I was trading that $500 allocation, I traded that $500 allocation when my account balance was 5,000 and I might only carry over two different positions, or when my account size was 15,000, I still had that same $500 allocation amount because that was the amount at the time I was comfortable with losing and going to zero and still being able to trade my plan. What Because what is the purpose of creating a trade plan if you're not going to follow it? All right. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Thank you for your questions. I hope that this was beneficial to you, and I encourage you to test this out and really find that amount that allows you to trade your plan and not your emotions. I will see y'all next Thursday, same time, same place. Much love, fam.